Recording in progress.
Morning, Chairperson. Morning, Chairperson. Chairperson, I profusely apologize for this. I think now the host should be able to share.
Okay, so who's the host?
I can now see it from my side, Chairperson, from Celia.
Please go ahead, SG.
Many thanks indeed, Chairperson, and let us take collective responsibility to apologize to honorable members that this is not a matter that should sit with Secretariat. It's all our responsibility. Somehow, those of us who were having hosting rights were all kicked out. We had to be readmitted to the meeting. But let me get straight to the point by starting with what we had said previously, the 5-year strategic plan. The 5-year strategic plan, Chairperson, had included matters of legislative reform. And amongst other things, we had said we'll sustain and protect the quality of national indicators, which, regardless of our challenges that we may face, be they financial or human resource, we will continue as StatSA to protect national indicators. And indeed, we'll drive business transformation and change. And going forward, let us recap on the legislative reform, the Statistics Amendment Bill. One of the things is that consultations took place, and then comparison of the Statistics Act with other domestic laws in respect of data privacy, data access, and indeed comparison of the Statistics Act with other international laws. The study towards the SIAS, which is the socio-economic impact assessment system that was undertaken. The comments that we got from the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor, and indeed the key amendments to the Stats Act, and going forward, the impact of the revised Statistics Act to the entire system of national statistics. And of course, finally, the Statistics Amendment Bill was submitted to Parliament. So this is what was previously done. What did the Portfolio Committee raise? One is that the length, and this is when we appeared before this committee previously, honorable members raised these issues, the lengthy time to process the amendment bill after it was submitted to Parliament for processing. And I'm glad that it was accordingly gazetted following our discussion, a matter that I will talk to. The 10-year cycle of undertaking a population census. This one, we went back to the Act and noted that we had included in the Act that it will be 10 years according to current practice. However, the minister may direct the Statistician General, and on the advice of Council and the Statistician General, of course, funds, pending the availability of funds, we can actually conduct a census at any given moment. So we don't have to wait for 10 years. And this clause was actually built in. It's just that at the time we presented and when we responded to questions, we didn't illuminate it. The readiness of StatSA to implement the amendment bill, and of course, the impact and affordability to establish statistics units in organs of the state. We had said that from our side as StatSA, we are ready. But of course, in terms of the impact and affordability to establish units will depend on the availability of funds from the state coffers to be able to make sure that such departments do establish units. However, from our side, let me mention that even when it's rather not in the Act as we seek it in the amendment bill, we already have established relations with some departments, including departments of Home Affairs, which hosts the National Population Register, and the Department of Police, South African Police Services, where we deal with official crime statistics, the Department of Agriculture, where we conduct the agricultural census of commercial agriculture. And indeed, as we look at that, there may be a staggered approach in that, particularly the agricultural census. Funding comes in drips and drabs, and we might have to kind of enforce that going forward. Completing this before the end of the 6th administration is a process that the current portfolio committee is working quite hard to make sure that we drive this process. So what has happened from the 6th of October when we appeared before this committee? We have received, following the gazetting of the bill, there were written comments that were received from the South African Reserve Bank that were, the main issue was access to enterprise level data at more granular level from organs of state such as Stats SA. Now, when we talk about granular level, because we are already having a protocol, which I will come to in the form of an MOU, where we share data between ourselves and the South African Reserve Bank. But such data is in line with the law, the statistics law, in that we cannot share individual records. So once we talk about granular level data, it means that the South African Reserve Bank is asking for information that includes identifiers. So I will give a good or a few examples. When we collect information about enterprises, one is that there is a one-way direction to Stats SA, in that the Commissioner of SARS gives us information on the business register. And that information, because by law, we are allowed to collect this information at granular level, including identifiers. And they give us the business register because we need to know which businesses are still active at any given moment in terms of the work that we do in our economic statistics. Now, any information that we share with the South African Reserve Bank chairperson takes away the identifiers. So nobody, including the Reserve Bank, can see which company returned what information. At persons level, we collect information about income and expenditure of individuals, their living circumstances, and we collect information about their employment rights. I see the screen says Celia has left. Yandi, if you could arrange that Secretariat reconnect Celia quickly so that we continue sharing while I'm talking. Now, Chairperson, amongst other issues is when we collect information about employment rights, we are able to deal with issues of removing identifiers when we talk to releasing such results or we share them with any other organ of the state, particularly the Reserve Bank. It's the same in the quarterly employment survey. We do not show identifiers. We collect a lot of sensitive information, Chairperson. I will give another example because I was going to give these examples anyway while they are trying to show the slides. Amongst other issues, as we collect information about undocumented migrants, as we have seen in the census, undocumented migrants do from time to time, Chairperson, withhold information all over the world, especially when they know that this information or they suspect may be shared with law enforcement officers. And in the process, they would withhold the information. Our arrangements, as is in other countries, with people who represent NGOs or any other agency that represents them, is that we have a confidentiality clause at STSA. We also collect information in the demographic and health survey, Chairperson, about people's, and this we work with the Department of Health and the MRC, about people's sexual behavior in the society. Now, we do ask, one amongst the questions we ask is whether a person has had sexual relations with another person outside their regular partner. Now, this is done under clauses of confidentiality, and we have never had leaks. And members of the public answer honestly. In the demographic and health survey, we do have a reflection of this kind of information. We have registered live births. For example, we get records from Home Affairs where we report that there's a number of children from ages 11 all the way to 17 who have gone to Home Affairs to register their children. The Department of Social Development has come to us and say, give us such records, including addresses and information. And we have said, no, we can't give such information because that information is collected under clauses of confidentiality. They can go to Home Affairs if Home Affairs can give them such information, but we cannot. Now, the biggest issue here is that if enterprises, that is business, and members of the public start to suspect that we are passing on their information to third parties, be it the South African Reserve Bank, Social Development, SARS, and any other organ of the state, law enforcement officers, members of the public will no longer give us such information. And if they don't give us such information, it will mean that we as STSA cannot report accurately on the snapshot of what we find. So in the law, Statistics Act, which we have now, and in the amendment bill, we seek to defend our methods and uphold confidentiality and by not even sharing with organs of the state. So the current practice as prescribed in the Stats Act is that the South African Reserve Bank or any other entity cannot have access to data at a level that will compromise confidentiality because we uphold confidentiality. So the independence of the statistician general, confidentiality, actually, let me start by saying that confidentiality and upholding our methods guarantee the independence of the statistics entity in the form of Statistics South Africa. So the South African Reserve Bank is asking that Section 17 of the Statistics Act, which deals with confidentiality, should include a subsection that allows for disclosure of information to authorized persons at the South African Reserve Bank, subject to the direction of the statistician general. Now, let us start off by saying that the inclusion of a clause for data accessed by the South African Reserve Bank officials in the amendment bill will compromise the following clause of the Primary Act, which is not in the amendment bill. It has always been there. That Section 17(1) says, despite any other law, no return or other information collected by Statistics South Africa for purposes of official or other statistics that relates to one, an individual, a household, an organ of state, a business, or any other organization may, subject to subsection 2 and 3, be disclosed to any person. And we'll come to those sections 2 and 3 in the next one, subsections. Subsection 2 talks to obtain a written consent of a person or business on the information they have given to us that we must disclose. So that will mean that everywhere for the more than 1 million records, we would have to write in the census, we would have to write to 62 million persons nationally, because it's not the only one who responds. Everyone whose information is there, we would have to write to them and get written information. That we include it in the form would not be enough. That is number one. Number two is that we would have to write to all businesses. What would happen, Chair, is that a few would give such consent, as we have seen in one country that attempted to want to do that, the United States, and it never worked. But many would refuse and would withhold information. Once they withhold information, we could collapse the entire system of statistics. So subsection 3 says the statistician general may, for statistical purposes, disclose to another organ of state information or data gathered in the course of a joint collection undertaken with an organ of state in terms of section 1411, which is on coordination. Section 1411 talks about coordination, on condition that the name, the address, or any other means by which the respondents may be identified is deleted. So I must admit, Chairperson, that in relation to the South African Reserve Bank, in the next slide, we already have built-in arrangements in that in section 20A, which allows for regulations to be made regarding protocols and guidelines on data, access, and strictly confidentiality, are actually raised in 14A of the current amendment bill. Chairperson, as we say so, we are saying that we have a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and the South African Reserve Bank, signed in 2020, which amongst other issues allows for data sharing within respective mandates of both organizations. Because the Reserve Bank has their act and they have a mandate, and we have our act and we have our mandate. In that each of us would uphold our mandates in line with our acts, and we would continue using this memorandum of understanding. And this memorandum of understanding has taken into regard the protocols and guidelines on access to data, but from our side, upholding confidentiality, in that whenever we share this information with them, one, we would never compromise or allow the name, the address, or any other means by which a respondent, be it a person or a business, may be identified. So we seek to uphold this and continue working with them along those arrangements. We cannot otherwise, Chairperson, accede or agree to giving them rights to granular data in the form that they would have identifiers, because we would have refusals for cooperation with members of the public, and we would not be able to report accurately in the future. The next slide, Chairperson, says which I would like to enumerate or explain in the future. But for now, I can say that in this course, I would say that and in isiZulu, I would say, Chairperson, amaningi angnawo. In English and Afrikaans, I would say finish and klar. Kasitswana kufetsa hona fa, kasisutu kaditumediso kufetsa hona mo. And then in Sivenda and the Felela Hane for Chairperson. The next slide, it looks like it's blank. I thank you.
Thank you, SG. Never tired to explain the last slide. It's a continued education, but it's also part of our heritage. And so there's always going to be time given to you on that slide, even if there's no time. Thank you for the presentation. Honorable members, we did start after that glitch. I think what you have is a presentation as planned from Stats SA, in a way also taking us through a few fundamentals of the bill and the purpose and why we need to have what we've advertised, but at the same time an earnest attempt to respond to South African Reserve Bank, which will still call and come and present to us. We've planned to do that on Tuesday, but we've been taken through some reasoning from Stats SA in relation to what is being requested. I see the hand of Honorable Phiri as part of the contribution. Any other hands, colleagues? Honorable Manyi. Any other hands? Oh, Honorable Pillay. Thank you. In that order. Honorable Phiri.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning to yourself. Morning to everybody in the platform. Stats SA led by the DM. Chair, I won't take much of your time, as we must also join the other meeting plenary, as you said last night when you adjourned. I want to make a few recommendations on the clause. One, on clause 2, Chair, on the aspects in the bill which can be in conflict with the other legislation that are identified areas of conflict and will only consequential amendment be required. It's just my key clarity on question clause 2. Then clause 4, I don't know whether am I audible, SG, so that you can respond properly.
You are audible.
Certainly, Chair.
You are audible. You speak through the chair. You are audible.
Thank you, Chair. Clause 4, noting the expansion and intervention of organs of the state having statistical units. What is the projected implementation period to develop statistical units with the required capacity, and what is the potential impact of cost containment measures in this regard? As I proceed on the same clause,
we're losing you there.
as I go to, on the same breath, what are the budget implications of the bill for the Stats SA? The last one is clause 6. What intervention mechanism will the stats or the SG have where statistical units in organs of state fall short of the required standard of SASQAF and the quality stats output? I want to put 2 recommendations, Chair, through yourself, if I'm allowed. I've made my questions, but I want to put a recommendation. Can I proceed, Chair, with a recommendation?
Please go ahead.
A clause of enforcement and enforcement to improvement plan should be developed to ensure improvement and consequences. On the bill, I'm realizing that there's no clause that put the enforcement to improve. So I want to make that recommendation, or we must also have a clause that has got in enforcement. Then secondly, we must include a clause that enables the use of approved technological system and processes for data collection. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Pili, for your contribution. Honorable Mani.
Thank you, Chair. SG, just a quick one. When you close, you say ngomkhulu umbulelo. When you open, ngomkhulu umbuliso. Okay. All right. We leave that one there.
That's it. That's in order. That's in order, Honorable Mani. we are revealing a single generation.
Yes. But I think the SG is making an attempt, so let's assist him. But well done, SG.
Thank you.
Yeah. A couple of things. One, I just wanted to just check these time pressures that we are working on, whether, for the credibility of what we would have called a public participation, is there no scope to reopen the process and advertise more widely that we're looking for input and all that? Because the changes that are going to be made are quite fundamental. And to have just spoken only to the Reserve Bank, I don't think it will do justice to the report when we say we've done public consultation and only spoken to only a single institution. Maybe this talks to how well advertised this is. I mean, this thing, I know it would have been properly, I don't know where it was advertised, Chairperson, because if you look at the institutions that are impacted on this, are quite, extensive. And I know even the NGOs, we've got a very active NGO sector in South Africa. Not to have even one of them saying anything, I think it's a telltale sign, Chairperson, that the manner in which this was advertised can be improved. I don't know how it was done and all of that, but I just know that we've got a very active NGO sector in this country. So that's the first thing. And then on the things that I just, when I browsed through, I wanted to just check this thing of amending the title to Statistician General of Republic of South Africa and all of that. That when I looked at that, and I looked at, I don't know, Chairperson, whether are there any protocols around using something of South Africa. If I looked at the institutions that do this, they're actually the Chapter 9 institutions. And these Chapter 9 institutions, when we talk about independence, they are truly independent in that they don't have like a political head that they report to. They report only to the Constitution, the law, and Parliament. And therefore, their independence is unquestionable. Chairperson, I'm not saying the SSSA one is questionable, but I'm just saying from the optics, if you put side by side someone that reports to a minister versus someone that reports to Parliament, I mean, it's chalk and cheese. So I don't know what are the protocols. My gut feel is that, I mean, for instance, we've got DGs that sit almost at the same space as the Statistician General. But those DGs are not what of South Africa. They are of their various departments. So I don't know what are the protocols, Chairperson. I think that's what must guide us as to what is the protocol of using of South Africa, so that we are properly guided. So that's that one, then, Chairperson. And then also on this 10-year period, I've also listened to the DM in Parliament, and I checked up on what you were saying, and what you were saying was correct. That many countries, I've also seen the US, I've also seen China, I've also seen a report on the United Nations and all of that. Looks like 10 years is a fashionable thing, but I don't know what are the considerations, Chairperson. Sometimes something looks obvious. But maybe there are underlying things that are not as obvious. Maybe if one can be educated very briefly to say these are the issues that are at play. Because maybe I'm just using a pedestrian planning issue to say, if you give me information that is 10 years old, I'm not able to plan with that information. It's 10 years old. But maybe, I don't know what the other countries are doing to mitigate that. And whether whatever they have in China and US to mitigate that, do we have the same thing? Because their planning is proper in these countries. You know, they meet their targets in various things. So their planning is proper. But I just don't know if we take these cycles that are used in countries that have got the rest of their systems functioning, whether if we do a plug and play, are we going to have the same quality outcome? Thank you, Chair. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Honorable Manyi. Honorable Pillay.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, and to all members on the platform, Honorable members, DM, SG. Chair, firstly, let me welcome the presentation. It's always refreshing to listen to the SG. He just has a way of bringing across any information. I want to support the recommendations made by Honorable Piri. And I just want to comment on the concerns raised by Stats SA in respect of the Reserve Bank. Now, Chair, in any research or study that is commissioned, there will be a purpose of a study, there will be a scope, and it will be for a specific desired outcome. Now, when you undertake that study, you also undertake to interview participants and respondents on the basis that that information is used for this specific study. And so it will be ethically and morally incorrect to have to then share specific details of respondents. There's no challenge with sharing outcomes of research. And like we would have seen with the census, we would have seen with any study, that when you release data in terms of stats, in terms of information sharing, that's fine. But when you are requested to now zoom into actual respondents and actual persons, then that is something that cannot be allowed. And I think that we must consider seriously what Stats SA is saying in respect of what the Reserve Bank is requesting. And secondly, we do not want to end up in a case where ordinary people do not want to respond to surveys any longer. And that's one thing we must be very cautious of and stay far away from. So I want to support what they're saying about confidentiality and about sharing of information in respect of respondents. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Pillay, for your contribution. Honorable Graham.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is wonderful to actually not be traveling on a Friday, so I can actually participate in a meeting effectively instead of just listening to everybody. So thank you for the opportunity. Chair, just from our side, there are a few of the clauses that we just want to address. The first one is clause 1A, which sort of speaks to the definition of an entity with the NSS, and it defines an entity with the NSS as an organ of state and any organization, non-profit organization or business that produces and uses statistics or collects data. So while this is fairly okay, what it doesn't do is address whether or not an organ of state is required to be part of this organization. So it clarifies which organs are part, but doesn't clarify which organs of state need to be there. So State Department's linked to the collection of data. So while it might not seem sort of particularly contentious at this point, it is an issue going forward throughout the bill when we are looking at the requirements of the NSS and what it's supposed to be doing. So, we understand what an organ of state is, but that might need to be clarified, and we might need to define more distinctly what organs of state should be part of the NSS. And then clause 4B amends the Principal Act to add the purpose of the NSS. So this is to serve as a coordination structure for the production and use of official and other statistics. But again, the Act doesn't clarify the role of the organs of state and what organs of state must be part of this body. And what if no organs of state are part of the body? So if the bill intends to better coordinate and promote collaboration between government departments and civil society organizations, then the lack of clarity here will defeat the purpose of the NSS. Then in terms of clause 6C, which speaks to the timeframes from moving from 5 to 10 years, and we understand that obviously the cost of a national census is prohibitive, and that's one of the reasons why they're looking at it. But the problem is that if you look at the outcomes of the latest census that has happened, it's seen an adjustment to, for example, provincial legislatures. It's dealing with semigration, and those are things that are happening consistently. So the concern here is that things like equitable share will be affected if, one area has got a sudden semigration and they've got more people than they had originally anticipated, and they're not getting sufficient budget, and other areas have got less people and they've got a sort of an over budget. So we need to find some sort of solutions to how we can address that. If we're going to go the 10-year route, then we need to look at things like micro censuses, rolling censuses, registered based censuses to manage these things so that we are dealing with accurate stats as a government going forward, because otherwise we're not going to be making decisions that are based on facts, and that's evidence-based decisions is what I'm looking for. So we need to find other ways of addressing that. And then clause 6L, it's also, again, the NSS consists of both organs of state and private entities. So while we know that private entities have partnership agreements with the SG, the private entities may be involved in other work independently. So this clause is far too broad and gives the SG too much power. The purpose of the clause is intended to allow the SG to access data at no cost, but we need to look at the powers of the SG here. They're far too broad. Then just on clause 8, 8B says that the SG may advise entities within the NSS regarding the application of quality criteria. So this allows the SG to advise organs of state. Now, the SG can only advise entities in the NSS. So the question again becomes, what if an organ of state is not in the NSS? Can they still be advised? Because the bill does not clarify which organs of states are a part of the NSS. Clause 8C also creates confusion. It states that the SG must develop and implement for the NSS entities a system known as NSS. So I think the system needs to change names. We need to find another name that doesn't create confusion. And then clause 8C, which provides for the composition of the NSS, doesn't speak to funding. So if the bill is noted that there will be financial implications for the staffing of the NSS, we need to know that there's an implementation in that respect, and also whether there will be funding with respect to, for example, meetings and sort of other extraneous costs. Then finally, clause 9 intends to amend the provisions that give the SG and Stats SA the power to enter any land premises. We have a huge issue with this. I mean, this is a direct attack on the right to privacy, and we worry that this might have a constitutional implication. So while they can go and get a warrant, the discretion to grant the warrant is very broad because it can be done in chambers, which means that usual legal processes are dispensed with, and that a decision can be taken without the owner of the property even having a right to defend their right to privacy, because they don't even need to know that the warrant is being sought. So this is a big problem for us in terms of a private dweller's right to privacy and security. I mean, in a country where we have massive GBV, is it reasonable to criminalize a woman who denies Stats SA access to her home? So I think this is something that we have to look at quite seriously, because there are two ways we can approach it. First, that the right of private dwellers to refuse entry should be dealt separately to that of organs of state and other land premises, and come up with a solution there, or we adopt an absolute protection of the right to privacy. So those are our major concerns. So in essence, we support the bill, but definitely with respect to the timeframes and to the right to privacy, those are the biggest contentious issues that we have a problem with. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That was the last hand, Honorable Graham.
Chair, I also have a hand there.
Yeah, that's a late hand. When I note hand, you need to come in, but I will give you so that in future you know. Go ahead, Honorable Maglu.
Chair, my apologies. I struggled with the link to come in. I see it's not only myself. but my humble apologies. I just also want to join some of the members with particular reference to the issue that has been mentioned on the collecting of data. I would like to know what kind of method they are going to use. And also, adding to the concern of some members of privacy and also the state we are living in, people are very reluctant to submit and give data, even if you write an email. Those who have done, their masters direct readings will agree. When asked for data, be as it may, what type of method you are using, the broader community out there are very, very reluctant when it comes to this. On the issue pertaining to privacy that is Honorable Gray mentioned, I want to share that concern and I want to echo it. There are quite after the previous census, numerous videos that has made their rounds with hectic conflict between customer and service provider, where people are almost, get physically with one another. So I think that is an issue of concern in that kind of method, or rather power being given through that 0.8 to states SA pertaining to access on private property. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Maglu, and to all other honorable members for your contributions and questions and clarities you've sought. I'm going to ask the SG to quickly respond to those clarities and questions that were asked. But before I do that, I think it's important that I clarify the process, because he would not be in a position to do that. It's a committee process. Firstly, today is not deliberations. I should have said that up front. It's not deliberations from the committee. We opened the advert, asked for submissions. We're told to have received one, which we are planning to allow South African Reserve Bank to present on Tuesday. Today was States SA as the anchor of the bill, as you would do in any other department, in coming to explain and present to us. What it then means is that you hold back on our comments, because our deliberations, including the recommendations that have been raised, including the clause-by-clause issues raised by Honorable Graham, we're going to have to park those and allow and listen to the submission. So Tuesday, it's an opportunity for us to listen to what South African Reserve Bank is saying. As part of our program, you would see that we also got a session where we're going to take this bill as members, as part of our deliberations, clause by clause. Not today, because you wouldn't want, as members, to formulate a position before you have listened to everything else. And when you do that, it must have been informed by what you have heard, the kind of submissions that you have received. That's normally how the process unfolds. I'm in an unfortunate position, because in the Justice Committee, we do this every week. And I must raise this to SG, because I think the points you have raised are quite firm and strong. The issue that we might even want to explore for the coming Tuesday or even thereafter, there's another organ of state, which is called Information Regulator, which anchors POPIA Act. We might even want to invite that organ of state, whether it's on Tuesday after the Reserve Bank or any other day, so that they either confirm the assertions, the points made by States SA, and enhance that, or they might even confirm and enhance what South African Reserve Bank is saying, especially when it relates with issues of confidentiality, because that's necessarily their space. So that's an issue that, and I'm raising this with Secretary, that we might want to do that. Honorable Manye had raised, because this would not be answered by Stats SA or the DM, the issue of the process. So what we would have done, which is done in all other processes, is that once the bill was introduced to the committee, we then allowed for public involvement and public participation of that, as were required by Section 59 of our Constitution, this issue of public access there, because we're not just talking about representative democracy, we're talking about participatory democracy. And we would have given that 3 weeks for the public to comment on that bill before ourselves can say anything. That would have come to a close on the 24th of November. And from everybody else that would have seen that, we have only received one submission. It might have to do with the technical nature of the bill, because any other bill, you might have received a lot of those. And so the process is such that the fact that you have received 1 or 2 or less than 5 doesn't mean that you must reopen again the process, because the non-response is also part of the process. It's taken as a response to the process, and as we'll continue even having the open meetings even there after the closure of that. So it might not be a wise thing to do to reopen it again, because then you're opening other doors. And then when it's another bill, then you are then saying you're creating a precedence for other kind of processes. So I just wanted to touch that. Ms. SG, your response to those issues, and then after the DM can come in.
Many thanks indeed, Chair. Let me start off by saying that we do appreciate all the input that we always receive from the committee. And on a quick one, the issues of budget implications are usually not included in acts unless if there's an issue of a fine, where the act may state that if there are contraventions, the fine may be an imprisonment of up to 6 months, or not exceeding 10,000 rands or 50,000 rands, whatever determination may be in line with the state law advisors. But in terms of including budgetary implications in a bill, is that assume we were to say whatever amount would cost 100,000, it would mean that when the inflation changes and the value of that 100,000 has been lost in another 5 years, we would be changing the law every now and then. So those are issues that we leave in the space of the protocols and the work program, the protocols that we do in line with implementation. And that obviously takes into account matters of organs of state that may come to us and say, yes, we know you want to implement, but we can't implement. I'll give a good example. Even we ourselves, successive governments and indeed statements by presidents and ministers have said that we wanted to address unemployment, poverty, and inequality. But we at Stats SA were never funded for poverty. We could not measure inequality since 2015. We have been doing the quarterly labor force survey. So if we include it in the bill or in the act, it would mean that we would have to uphold it. Otherwise, there would be contraventions. So I think that one we are we would rather leave it to protocols. As regards technology, we have been advised that the wording like the collection, processing, and storage of information, and not only here in South Africa, but all over the world, do encompass all forms of technologies that may come. I will give a good example. In 1996 to 2001, we were using keystrokes. It was still covered by that part. We went into scanning technology. It's still covered. We are now into digital collections, largely using iPads or smart facilities. It's covered. Going into the future, into drones and potentially even cloud, the collection, processing, and storage would still be covered without having to be specific that we want a technology.
Having changes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Turning to something else. Go ahead.
Yeah. May I proceed, Chair?
Please proceed.
Yeah. And obviously, the issue of the Statistician General of South Africa. The Statistician General is holding a rank of a Director General, and indeed is reporting to a minister, in this case, the minister in the presidency. It has never been explicitly said the Minister for Statistics. We will remember that we previously reported to Home Affairs, so it just say the minister responsible for statistics. We reported to Home Affairs where the population register is. When the RDP office was established in 1992 under Minister J. Naidu, Stats SA reported there. We were moved to the Minister of Finance. Ourselves and National Treasury and SARS were reporting to the Minister of Finance. With the establishment of the Planning Ministry, we were moved to planning with when Minister Manuel moved to planning. And when planning, monitoring, and evaluation were combined under the presidency, we were moved into the presidency one. But when recently the Minister of Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation under Minister Marupin Ramokupa was established, we remained in the presidency. So reference to the minister has always been like that. But particularly to the SG of Statistician General of South Africa, is that we are following international arrangements. Of course, Honorable Mani raises a critical point that other countries may have their laws and their constitutions. The chief statistician of the United States, for example, Karen Ovis, previously was called the chief statisticians, but for almost 200 years, owing to their laws, had to change to be the chief statistician of the US. But other countries like Canada and in recent times, India, chief statistician of India, Dr. Samantha, had to be changed because it was found from the United Nations fundamental principles of official statistics, leaving an limitation, especially for those of us who are directors general under a ministry, in that when you want to enforce laws of collection beyond just government, it becomes a serious issue. And Honorable Graham raises this issue in one of her comments, in that when she says the Statistician General should receive data at no cost, is because at the stage when you are at an SG of a department, it becomes very difficult to have access, including data, especially from the private sector, because they are in the business of, they are in business, but you find that they don't sell data at all. Data is just a byproduct. But when you want to access that, it comes at a cost. The problem is here. The cost of accessing data, particularly from the private sector, is sometimes much more expensive. We just conducted a census at 3 billion. We have requested for data from some private sectors. They said, no, it's okay. You can give us the data. It's not their business. But if you pay us 7 billion, we will give you the data. Now, that has limitations that it's more than even the budget that we have ever run at any given point. Now, that company could go bankrupt. And in the process, once that company is closed down, it's going to close down with such data. And when it closes down with such data, because such data would never have been used to give a true picture of what the nation is, the risks are much more great at any given moment to measure accurately what is happening in the country. So the Statistician General of South Africa is in line with other practices the world over that allows access. Certainly, Chair, Honorable Graham raises another issue, access to dwellings, in that when we were conducting the agricultural survey, census of commercial agriculture, we would go to the farms, and farmers who we have a very good relationship with would say that, go to my bookkeeper, you will get the information. But we have to collect the geo point where we are collecting. So we still had to have, and we have met with all agricultural unions, and we have a very good relationship with them, and they use our information. Because otherwise, if you look at a company like Coca-Cola or South African breweries, for example, if they have farms all over the country and we don't have geo points as to where they are and link the information, their statements stay in Johannesburg. What would happen is that we would get the information from a bookkeeper in Johannesburg, and reference would only be made from Gauteng, because that's where the bookkeeper stays. And most companies, your ShopRite checkers and the like, we would not be able to see where the enterprises are, especially that they establish in different municipalities. As regards dwelling units in relation to persons, we don't insist on going to sit with them in their bedroom or their kitchen, as long as they allow us in their gates. Because when we collect data, we collect from a geo point. So when we stand in the street, when you look at a map that we use, maps that we use, and our field workers, and a census was a good example. If they stand in the street and someone answers questions from the street, it cannot link that point to a geographic location or a dwelling unit. It's even much more complex in Soweto, in that we used in the past a household of people who are using chairperson or are accessing services like water and electricity from the same meter. But now you have 10 back rooms that people are using the same water pump or water point and meter, they pull together. So we are using a household in the form of food. So what we do when we interview them, we sit with them at the door of their informal settlement or in the back room. And on a meter to meter point, we are able to capture households. So it would be very difficult for us to sit somewhere, or our field workers to sit under a tree and assume that they are households that we haven't gone to interview at their point of stay. So we don't insist on getting to their kitchen or their bedroom or their house, but as long as we have access, because we have to do observations of what we are capturing as we talk to them. And with members of, with people that are undocumented migrants, it would be very difficult, because those that are on the farms, they would say that meet us at the farm gate, in the road on the farm gate. It would not work. Farmers have already allowed us to access that. In the villages, people would say, come and meet me at the Induna's place, in a form of a broadcast way in which we meet them. So we would not be able to report accurately on the state of the nation. Information regulator, Chair, we would welcome that at some stage we invite them. We have consulted them. We were asked when we went to cabinet that we must go back to them, especially with the Pope here. They gave us a written comment that states say, in line with us upholding confidentiality, we are actually in compliance with the Pope here. But it's not what we say that is important. It's what Parliament hears. So would happily welcome that they are invited at some stage. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, SG. Thank you for that comprehensive response. Quickly, DM, Any quick remarks? Because all of us are required at 10 to join the National Assembly plenary.
No, Chairperson, I think I'm fine. I'm also fine with the fact that you have made a determination that the day for deliberations would be on Tuesday, where we would obviously, or subsequently.
Yeah, no, let's correct that. It's still not on Tuesday. Tuesday,
Yeah, subsequently.
We're listening to the South African Reserve Bank and POPIA, information regulator, as I've just indicated. And then we have a date in our program where we have deliberations, so it's subsequently, not necessarily on Tuesday. Go ahead, DM.
In fact, I would have advised before the AC spoke that we spare all responses for the day of the deliberations. So I think I'm fine. We will await ACRB on Tuesday, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, DM. Thank you, honorable members. I suggest that we leave it there for today. And thank you for your comments and heads up. I think Stats SA now leaves knowing what is in your mind and the kind of concerns, clarities, or questions that you have asked, even if they have not responded to everything else in granular form. But that would be their homework, even if it means that they might want to prepare a more elaborate things to empower us and so on. That will have to happen. We will see you on Tuesday as we continue with the process of the bill, listening to South African Reserve Bank explaining themselves. We have heard what the Stats SA says. We take that into account. We're not making any conclusion at this stage. We'll hear the South African Reserve Bank, and we're hoping that we'll also get information regulator. Thereafter, as members, we're then going to get into our own discussion as the committee based on what we would have received. So in that regard, I want to thank you. That would have been the only item. So in preparation for the next plenary at 10, I don't want to keep you any longer. This portfolio committee meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Many thanks, Chairperson. Ngomkhulu Mbulelo.
That's a good practice. Uyibambile.
Don't leave the chair.
Uyibambile.
Yeah, well done, SG. Well done.
Many thanks, Honorable Manyi.
Sure.
Thanks.